Hello and welcome to Try Mechanics podcast. So another episode of the podcast today, we're going to be talking all about shoes and about shoe essentially shape and styles, but more basically related to how we've been led to believe what a running shoe should be shaped like, and it relates back to a conversation I had with a client yesterday. So I'll kind of take you through what happened with this conversation. So a client came to see me with a pair of running shoes, a very standard set of shoes. I believe they were a set of Brooks or something similar. Relatively built up, big, squishy, but quite high heel. Relatively pointed toe box, lots of extra bits and pieces on them. They probably had somewhere written on them that they were for motion control or something along those lines. Probably a little bit of arch support. Probably weighed about 200 grams too much because they had all this extra stuff on them they didn't really need. And they were causing the client lots of problems. They were causing her problems with essentially tendon problems over the front of the foot because she was having to tighten the laces down so much to be able to get the shoe on super tight, because it was slopping around all over the place, because it was far too heavy, but also it was far too long because she had to oversize the shoe to essentially get in the right width that she needed to be able to allow her forefoot to spread, which is just ludicrous really, but it's something I see on a daily basis. It's something I see almost every single day, is that we're in a shoe we're told to get a centimetre or something along those lines in front of the toes, which is ridiculous because a shoe, the upper should be like a sock, so you should wear it to the end of your toes and it should conform to your toes and not put lots of pressure. If it is, then there's a problem. And I've always said before that a shoe should be like putting on a pair of slippers. It shouldn't be like you have to break the thing in. If you have to break it in, it's wrong straight away. I can promise you that. But the interesting thing was, on her feet, she was wearing a set of what I think were a set of kind of gym shoes, so kind of Asics gym shoes. They were foot-shaped. They did have the space around the big toe. The upper was knitted, looked like some of the shoes now. The base was relatively free foam and kind of conformed to her foot. And I looked down and I said, what about those? Oh, I couldn't wear these. I could never wear these for running. They're not running shoes. I was like, well, let me have a look at them. And I looked at them. They were nicely cushioned in the right places. They expanded and moved. The sole had kind of block style that actually expanded and moved to the foot. They were much, much lighter. And she said, oh, these are so comfortable. They're like slippers. I said, you should run in these. No, I couldn't run in these. They're not running shoes. And we had this conversation. It went over and over a few times. And eventually we chatted. I ended up convincing her that maybe she should try something like an Archer Escalante, which is essentially a slightly more cushioned version of what she was wearing in the gym shoe. But it really got me thinking how we've been kind of indoctrinated to think that running shoes are shaped a certain way. And it all goes back to, really, I believe, the kind of creation of Nike. Listening to Shoe Dog by Phil Knight and about the creation of Nike, is that they were in essentially a bit of purgatory. They didn't know what to do, whether to go down the more fashion-based line, which was more at the time a more tapered or pointed toe box, relatively narrow, because the thing about feet is that people don't think that wider feet are that attractive. And it's been known for centuries, the women would crowbar themselves into much narrower pointed feet because narrow and pointed was an attractive shape, whereas wide and flat, like a flipper, was not. So if you had wider feet, you were encouraged, like a corset, you were encouraged to crowbar yourself into something narrow. And actually they would do it with children as well to make sure that they had narrower feet. There are some cultures where children are put in certain shapes of shoes to make sure they end up with a certain shape that is desirable, which is just quite horrific, really. Because the problem with this is that this is not like a corset. This isn't trying to alter something that really doesn't matter too much for your movement and control. This is huge. This is really important. So what was happening at the time was the traditional racing flat, something like the Roger Bannister had worn, would just be a leather shoe with a few spikes on the bottom. And it didn't have enough cushioning. And Bill Bowerman came along and said, well, we need some cushioning to run on the road. So he put basically a waffle iron and glued a load of cushion on the bottom, and it worked. But it was still relatively foot-shaped. And actually, if you look at some of the redos of the original Nike shoes like that, they actually have a relatively foot-shaped toe box that particularly splays out on the inside. Something I call the out pouch of the big toe that allows the big toe to stabilise as it comes to land. Really important. You can lose a lot of width on the other side of the shoe. So you can lose a lot of width on the outside of the shoe, but not on the inside. And actually, interestingly, if you look at a lot of the Mizuno and New Balance and a few other shoes, you turn them upside down, they have this almost banana shape in that they go very much to the inside. So, with that in mind, why did we end up with what we've got end up today? It was sort of because Nike were in this position where they were making their own shoes, and they kind of could only really go down either the fashion line or the more narrow tapered toe box line, or the kind of athletic shoe shape. And I think that's what caused them to end up with this kind of more fashion base, because they were trying to sell trainers both for running and for fashion, and the jogging boom hadn't really fully hit. So we weren't really doing shoes for performance. It was a very niche thing. So therefore they went down that more fashion route. Then when they started producing lots of shoes that both had performance and fashion in mind, the tapered toe box stuck. There is no reason for it. It is very strange, because it definitely does not help anything. And so the problem is that we've ended up now believing that running shoe shapes like that. When companies like Ultra come along, who are much wider, their initial shoes looked ridiculous. They look completely wrong. But let me have a bit of a thought on this. Have you ever seen the Adamo split nose saddle? So the cyclists and triathletes in the room will suddenly go, yes, or the runners will probably go, no, what are you talking about? Or Google it. Now, these saddles are very strange looking. They've basically taken the front off the saddle. They've chopped it off, and it's got two prongs. Now, I remember when they first came out, I looked at that and said, that is the ugliest saddle, the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I will never put that on my bike, because it just does not look right. It looked horrible. Now, you look at these range of bikes and they've all got them, and they look amazing because they look like a spaceship. But it's all about perception. It's all about, now it looks normal. Now we don't look quite so odd, quite so weird for having this strange two-pronged spaceship saddle. And the same with running shoes. They are getting wider. They are getting better shaped. A lot of Nikes, the Nike Streak LT4 that's just come out, is a shoe that I've started to recommend to a few clients, because if you get the sizing right, it's got a fantastic pop. It is much wider and has much more space around the big toe than a lot of other shoes. And that's a good shift forward for certain companies. But the key thing is that you need to have a look at your foot. If you have a wider foot, then you are always going to need basically a wider, more foot-shaped shoe. But really start to look at what actually the shoe shapes are and whether it actually fits to the shape of your foot. Because if we start pushing the market in this direction, if we all start buying more foot-shaped shoes, they will start stocking them. Because shops like Up and Running, they for a while stocked a lot of the Brooks Pure range, like the Drift, that had a very foot-shaped last. And they stocked a few shoes that had a good foot shape, and they got rid of them because people didn't buy them. And that's the problem, is that we need to get these shoes back in shops so people can actually try them on. Buy Ultras, buy these shoes that actually are much better shaped for your feet. Push the market that way, so that we all end up with better shoes. So that's the critical thing. That's all I wanted to talk about today. Very, very brief. Now, I just want to say a quick note about the company that I run, Tri Mechanics, and the fact that we both offer the kind of studio-based analysis, so we look at the running side of things as well. But we also offer coaching. But we offer it in a slightly different way, both for running and for triathlon particularly, and possibly for cycling as well. It's something we can work on, is that we offer coaching in a way that works with you. So when we coach triathlon, we coach it in more of a consultant capacity, in that we can work on training plans, we can give you those plans, we can tell you how things should fit in throughout a week. But we also work with you, work with your psychology, work with how you, essentially the science interacts with you. So what you like to do, what you don't like to do, and all those different elements. Put all that together, that means that you're moving forward and developing as an athlete, rather than just following the kind of cookie cutter type training plan that just tells you to do this week and this next week, and that's it. So if you're interested in the coaching side of things, please have a look at our website. Have a look at our website is www.trimechanics.co.uk. Have a look at the different pieces of these bits and pieces on there, and get in touch if you have any questions. We're also very active on Twitter and on Facebook as well. So have a look and see whether that's something that would be interesting for you, whether it's just a short-term consultancy to kind of help you work through training plans to see whether you go in the right direction, whether the nutrition and those things are also playing a part, and that's also something that we do. So have a listen to this, have a listen to the other podcasts if you like this, and let other people know if you want to, if you find them interesting. and we'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.